We cannot take action, but we can start the meeting. Then we got my cousin in the back.
Good morning.
All right.
I haven't seen you in a while.
I know it's been 12 hours.
Let the record show we call the meeting in order at 9:40 a.m. Roxanne, do we have any public comment on agenda items?
We have one public speaker.
Yes, sir. We have one public speaker, Ms. Ann Bittlemeyer.
And come on up, give us your name and address for the record, please, ma'am. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Good morning. Ann Bidlingmeyer, 1920 Harriet Drive in Tallahassee. I was unprepared for what I see as the impact of the development on the two city blocks for the new high-rises being proposed for Cascades Park. I went there and walked through with a couple of folks and looked at the huge patriarch trees and the slope that is going to be wiped out. I don't think the community understands the impact this high-rise is going to have on that piece of property. Last remaining tree and vegetative habitat will be leveled and scraped off. And I've tried to find out what the occupancy rate of the existing high-rises downtown were, and the assistant city manager didn't seem to know, and I know that one of them at least is 90% vacant. And I'm just wondering if we need as many high-rises on that site, given the occupancy that we have downtown. And the thing that really got to me was the report that said some of the expenses, such as tree removal fees and fee in lieu of landscape requirements, could be waived by the city during review and approval of the necessary development agreement. I was co-chair of the committee that wrote the original tree and landscape ordinance for the city of Tallahassee, and to throw out the tree ordinance provisions, I think, is unconscionable, especially when what it boils down to is taxpayers are going to have to pay to have those trees taken out. I think that there has been very little public input on this project. I know it's been in the making for a couple of years, but I don't see that there has been enough outreach to citizens who really know a lot about these issues and can help. So I would hope that you would reconsider the impact and try to mitigate some of the impact of this project and come up with something that is good and that everybody can live with. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers?
No, sir. That's the last public speaker.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll move on to information items.
Oh, Lord.
Sure.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm speaking to you on behalf of in my capacity as a member of the board of the Florida Redevelopment Association to kind of give you an update on what the current status of legislation is regarding CRAs. There are two bills that are working their way through the system. Actually, one is already House Bill 17, which by Representative Rayburn, concerning CRAs, has been approved by the full House. It was approved on January 12th. And then Senate Bill 432, which was introduced by Senator Lee, is pending consideration by the Senate Subcommittee on Transportation, Tourism, and Economic Development. These bills are similar in many ways to the bills as they left as we ended last session. You will recall that in last year's legislative session, while the House passed a bill, the Senate bill never advanced out of the committee, and so there was no legislation. I want to just kind of go quickly over what both bills have in common and then highlight some of the major changes or differences between them. Both bills contain requirements that the governing board members have to participate in annual ethics training. Both bills require a higher level of reporting on an annual basis, focusing on things such as vacancy, commercial property vacancy rates, assessed property values, looking at those rates at the time the CRA was established versus what that current reporting year is. Both bills would require that the CRAs use the procurement process that is being used by the governing or the entity which has created them. And so, for example, if it's a city CRA, then it would use that city's procurement process. If it was a county CRA, it would use the county's process. And both bills have language that requires that the CRAs have to go through an annual audit and have some specificity as to what the audit must include. Those things are commonalities between the two. Some of the major differences, and I would think areas of concerns that many of the CRA members, organizations around the state have noted in the House bill. In the House Bill 17, there are two. One is that no new CRAs could be created except through a special act of the legislature. So CRAs would no longer be the domain of local governments to create. Existing CRAs would all sunset at the earlier of their resolution date, recalling that CRAs right now have a 30-year life, or 2038. And they could only be extended by a vote of a supermajority vote of the governing body. In the Senate bill, some major differences are there is extensive language in the Senate bill regarding the requirement for registrations of lobbyists that participate on behalf of CRAs. There is a list of prohibited activities, whereas the House bill pretty much follows Chapter 163 as far as what is allowed. The Senate bill specifically prohibits expenditures related to promotional activities, tourism, and assistance to organizations that provide social services. There's also a requirement in the Senate bill. It's a little unclear, but it requires that 2 members of the governing body have to be non-elected appointed members. Now, it's unclear because the language specifies committees of 5 or would select 2. We're assuming that that means that if it was adopted, that all existing bodies would have to add 2. Right now, the limitation in the statute is 9. For example, the Tallahassee, Leon County CRA is at that majority level. So it's unclear if that language was adopted, how that would impact you. So that's where the legislation stands. The Florida Redevelopment Association is actively polling its members to try and determine which of those elements are the most concerning in the event that this legislation was to pass. I think you're aware, the Florida League of Cities is working very closely with the Florida Redevelopment Association and trying to express our concerns to the legislators on this. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about it.
Anything for commissioners? Seeing none, thank you.
All right.
3.02.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, or good morning. I'm going to give you just a quick update on some of the projects that we're currently working on, things that you've seen before. The first one we'll start with is the Tourist Development Tax and Art and Culture Funding. And basically, you'll recall that we've put together a process. We have assembled an advisory committee. They are in place now. We've already had one meeting, and we've gone over basically the charge to that review committee. And what they will be doing is essentially reviewing the applications and making a recommendation to the CRA board and also subsequently the county and the city. We have another meeting coming up February 1st, I think it's next Thursday, and we're going to go through sort of a finer version of the state statutes to make sure that we have everything correct. We're going to look at the review process, the application form, and they're also going to undergo ethics training because they'll be making recommendations on the expenditure of funds. We do plan to open the process to the public at the end of February. We are a little bit behind where we wanted to be, but we're still moving forward on this. There will be at least 2 public workshops that will be for the public to help people understand the process and the application. There will also be information online, and we will also be available too, just for emails and phone calls. So we know that the application is very complex, and we're willing to certainly help walk people through that and through the process. The next one is Washington Square. You'll recall this is the hotel right behind the county courthouse. Right now, the applicant is working with the city to address parking issues, where the parking will be, how much is needed, how that's going to work out. They're working on refining their plans. They do expect to move forward, we believe, in the spring, and as that moves forward, we will let you know how that's going. And then the last one, you may recall when we worked on our budget in November, we set aside about $200,000 for demolition and cleanup of damaged and derelict properties in Frenchtown Southside. Just wanted to let you know that CRA staff is working with growth management, we're working with code enforcement and housing to go ahead and get that going, to develop a standard program. And we're looking at a lot of options. You know, can an owner apply? Is this something that needs to come through code enforcement? There are a lot of different ways to structure it, but we're not letting, you know, the grass grow under our feet, so to speak. Growth management and code enforcement have already started cleaning up in this area. And here's one example we thought was a good one. This was paid for with CRA funds. This is Georgia Street, West Georgia Street in the CRA, and you can see a before and after. And this is what a difference that can make for a rather small amount of money. So we will be coming back to you with more information on this program and a formal program for your approval. In the meantime, we're going to keep using money to clean up properties that have already been identified as derelict. And that's it for the updates. We'll move forward with the agenda.
Anything else? All right, anything from commissioners? Seeing none, we'll move on to consent. Items 4.03 and 4.04 has been requested by the mayor to be pulled from consent. Is there a motion for the rest of consent?
So moved.
Second it.
4.01 and 4.01.02 have been moved by Commissioner Richardson, seconded by Commissioner Miller. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries without objection. 4.03.
Sheila, who did you say asked that?
Ma'am?
Who asked to have that pulled?
The mayor.
And what is it?
He's not here.
Sheila Williams from CRA staff will be making this presentation. She is the lead staff member on this program, and she does an outstanding job. So.
Do we know why the mayor pulled this?
Yeah.
Did he give you any indication?
Yes, we do.
I kind of, if I could, I have my own reason too. I think with these types of programs, they go on consent, and nobody ever knows that we ever do them. But these are good programs that we have. I think the public should know exactly. You know, it's kind of just letting the public know what we're doing and how good of a program it is.
All right, I just wondered if there was
No problem. With it. Yeah, no problem. With it. Actually, I would suggest that the board would, you know, hear it that, you know, these, especially these BFIP programs, I think they should not be on consent. They should be on general business, so we can either look at the pictures in public, and it can be a part of the public record that we did these things, because in the past we have facade grants that haven't been on consent, and then people turn around and say, what have you done? You know, and so I will make the request that we no longer put facade improvement grants on consent, that we put those things on general business.
glad to.
Great, thank you. Good morning, CRA board members, administration, staff, and citizens. As we mentioned, I do have a few brief slides to show regarding the item, agenda item. What I'd like to do is, we're going to call this one number 6-5. I'd like for you to hold that thought, 6-5. So the CRA received an application request for property located at 1622 South Monroe Street for the proposed walk-up restaurant. The owners of the property are listed in the property appraiser's website as Simply Soul Food, Inc. The listed registered agents for the corporation are Mr. and Mrs. James and Anita Morrell. Again, I said we'll call this one CRA GFS Commercial Facade BFIP number 65. I'd like to note that you guys did receive a staff review application summary along with the agenda item that was provided as a part of your agenda packets. At the present time, I'm showing a picture of the property as it exists currently. It is a vacant property, which often is used as overflow parking, so to speak, for U-Haul rental trucks. The property owners, Jay and Anita Morrell, would like to redevelop this site located at 1622 South Monroe for a walk-up restaurant. They're going to convert the lot to have a 16 by 12 enclosed food prep area with a canopy area with an additional 100-foot slab where a food truck will sit, with additional improvements to the site. The improvements to the site include landscaping, metal awning, exterior lighting, a delineated striped parking area with ADA parking space, and on-site monument signage, to name a few. It is estimated that this project will help provide 10 temporary construction jobs, 1 part-time job, and 2 full-time jobs that may be created from the proposed redevelopment. In actuality, the total cost for this project, including the construction, which is not an eligible item that the CRA funding will go towards. However, the property owners are making a total investment for this redevelopment project of $81,500. with a CRA funding request for eligible items in the amount of $21,250. Prior to, and this is a site plan that kind of was done for the property through one of their architectural firms that show the site improvements. As you can see, they are creating an ADA path from the right-of-way, which is South Monroe, to traverse into the site. So prior to any disposition on this item, I would like to mention that the CRA has actually processed 64 applications prior to your disposition on this request for commercial facade or BFIP applications. And these requests are for amounts that are under $50,000. As such, up to the present time, the CRA has provided approximately $2 million towards the CRA GFS district, either by commercial facade programs, projects, or grant requests, or the new improved business facility improvement program, which has kind of, so to speak, fostered an estimated $11.5 million in total project cost. So staff does recommend approval of this item 6.5. And the applicant or property owners are not here at this time, but I'd be happy to try to address any additional questions that you may have. Thank you.
Is there a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Approval been moved by Commissioner Mills, or a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Richardson. Quick question. When improvement grants like this happen, does it also increase the property value, which, by the way, increases the TIF?
It does.
Any idea how much TIF's going to be increased off this?
Commissioner, we won't know that until we have a meeting with the property appraiser's office. And we usually do that on the big projects right up front, but on the smaller ones, we look for the aggregate value on a block. So it'll be probably closer to the end of the year before we know.
Okay.
I'm glad to see this is going to happen, but I was stopped by 10 jobs created on an $81,000 project. That's a lot of jobs. Do we have, I was just interested if that was,
How that's
how do you
kind
know
of,
that?
that's kind of estimated because you have to think that they are construction and like someone was hired to do the renderings and you have an engineer and a contractor to do the redevelopment. It takes like temporary construction workers, and then you go with who your permanent workers would be, the person that would own actually or leasing the property. They have to work full-time. They have a staff person that works and then a part-time person. So that is kind of how those numbers were kind of estimated.
Okay.
We don't really have any solid firm date on that.
All right, thanks.
Motion on the floor is for staff recommendation made by Commissioner Miller, seconded by Commissioner Richardson. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries without objection. 4.04.
Thank you, and continuing in the same regard, we're going to call this one number 6.6. So this agenda item is a request for approval for $50,000 for a BFIP application for the CRA located in the Greater Frenchtown South Side. The property is located at 618 McDonald Drive, which is located inside of the Railroad Square Art Park. The owners of the property, as listed by the Property Appraiser's Office, is Railroad Square, Inc. Designated agents for the property are Mr. Adam Boynton Kay and his sister, Mrs. Lily Boynton Kay. Again, CRA GFS Commercial Facade BFIP number 66. Staff did do the staff review application summary report along with the agenda item that was provided to you as a part of your agenda packets. At the present time, the subject property is currently utilized as a 3,000 square foot warehouse and is attached to the recently completed House of Plywood Breeze Market, which is a unique tiny shop village. Adam and Lily Kay would like to repurpose or renovate or redevelop their parcel located at 618 McDonald Drive to an artist and creative entrepreneur live-work units, which is a permissible commercial use allowed by the zoning district. They are proposing 12 units, where 4 of the units will be 2-story units with the commercial development at the bottom story with residential on top, and then 8 flats that could be utilized also as live-work units. The proposed project has an estimated temporary job construction numbers of 8, part-time jobs are estimated at 8, and 4 full-time jobs may be created by the proposed redevelopment, property redevelopment. In actuality, here is a rendering of the before of the actual warehouse, and the bottom fenestration is of the front of the building. The property is a corner lot where it has property frontage along McDonald Drive, and on the eastern side, it's traversed by Industrial Drive. So right now, the fenestration that's up before you that says House of Plywood as is the southern portion of the building, and the right portion of the rendering is where the improvements are going to occur on the portion of the building that is currently the warehouse. So as you can see, there are going to be new awnings, windows, doors, faux balconies, Juliet balconies. They're adding a stairway, as you can see a staircase to traverse from the first story up to the second story located there. And here's some additional information on what funding could be used for if you approve this request for exterior improvements to include, again, the new doors, windows, the faux balconies, awnings, costs for any engineering drawings and services as it relates to eligible work items, resurfacing the parking lot and striping it, the repair of metal siding, exterior lighting, signage, and more. The total project cost in actuality, the property owners are making an investment of $500,000. The request through the CRA is for $50,000. We do a dollar for dollar match for BFIP. When it's in Greater Frenchtown Southside, the first $10,000, as you know, is given to an applicant for eligible work items that are $10,000 or less. The funding over that is done at a dollar for dollar match. So clearly for our funding, if you guys are to do a positive disposition on this request, we would be providing $50,000 to help with eradicating blight and helping this property with total project costs of $500,000. And I think that's getting quite a bit for putting in our funds. Also, the second rendering is along the eastern side of the warehouse. If you recall, I had 2 pictures of the property previously on another slide. The one located to the left is along McDonald. The picture located to the right is the portion that's located along Industrial. And this fenestration that you see down at the bottom is the eastern side, which is parallel to Industrial. So with that, again, remember, so far you all have approved 64 either commercial facade or BFIP projects within the Greater Frenchtown South Side for a total of approximately $2 million, with which has possibly fostered an estimated $11.5 million in total project cost. Provided that you approve this request, we would probably go up to approximately $12 million in project cost and still a little bit over a $2 million investment. Staff does recommend approval of this item. Mr. Boynton Kay is here to help address any questions or concerns that you guys may have along with me.
Chairman, I motion that we approve this measure.
Second.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Of our CRA funds, are any of those funds going to go toward interior renovations, or will they all be exterior?
the way our program works, when we're doing any analysis on the property, it does have to meet the threshold and the guideline requirements of the program. This program does not allow funding for any interior improvements. Staff, along with the property owners, we're very meticulous to be sure that the items that we are funding as what we're calling out eligible work items only are things as it relates to the existing structure and improvements to the property or the existing building or structure. So the answer to that is no, our funding will not go towards anything as it relates to additional square footage, anything as it relates to the roof, or anything interior to the site.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Motion on the floor made by Commissioner Proctor and seconded by Commissioner Richardson is for staff recommendations. Yes, sir.
I'd just say that we have, if I'm understanding the area's locale, we've put a significant investment with the FAMU Way property. That area is teetering. It can go up or down. I'm not sure if it's really hardcore blighted area, but if an owner is going to put $500,000 on a piece of property, every step we take to uplift it, to positively pull it out of its slide toward blight is moving in the right direction. I think that we've put millions of dollars on the FAMU Way, and by improving these sites here, it adds a lot of velocity to efforts to give the new look in that area.
Thank you, Commissioner. Motion on the floor is by Commissioner Proctor, seconded by Commissioner Richardson for staff recommendation. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Are any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. We'll move on now to Section 5.
Thank you.
Well, before we do that, do we need to formalize taking facade grants and BFRP grants off of consent, or is that can that just be taken as direction?
That's already been completed. I thought you had a motion earlier.
Oh, that wasn't a motion, yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead and do a motion.
Is there any objection to that?
No.
No, no objection? Short as approved. All right, Section 5, 5.01.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is an agenda item requesting $34,500 in grant CRA funds to fix a stormwater issue we're having over at the former shelter and Frenchtown Renaissance Community Center properties. As you will recall, we demolished those properties. We demolished the improvements in those properties a little less than a year ago, March and April of last year. Once the buildings came down, we started having some heavy rains, and we encountered some additional runoff off of those properties that was not anticipated. The property was set back into its natural state with a natural flow of water, and we've had some water runoff into properties on Macomb Street. We've gone back out with an engineer and looked at the site, and we've come up with a solution to add some berms on the site to help control the water, run it off a little bit different direction. Some will run towards Virginia Street, where it'll enter the city's stormwater system, and the other part was where it'll enter crossing the parking lot on the northeast corner of Macomb and Tennessee Street, and where it'll enter the city's stormwater system as well. The plan has been approved by city's growth management, and we are requesting $34,500 that will be awarded to, I believe it's Allen's Excavation to do the work.
Any commissioner comment? Is the motion for staff recommendation? Yes, sir.
It did, we went through a bid process for who was going to do the work?
Yeah, well, we did. We used the city's procurement process as one of the things that Michael talked about. We've always used the city's procurement process. So the city has contract number 3472. They've gone out and identified 4 contractors. It's a utility contracting services agreement, and we used we went to all 4 of those people who were listed under that and asked them to bid. 2 responded: Dowdy Plumbing and Allen's Excavation. Allen's was the lowest.
So we had a competitive process.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Is there a motion for staff recommendation?
I move staff recommendation. Second.
Question on this.
Yes, sir.
So we're continuing to put investment on this property. What is the anticipated vision for this property? Is it going to be in a holding pattern from now until the 46th President of the United States comes along? Or? what are we waiting on with this property? What is the sense of direction for this site? I don't want to keep putting money out and we're just holding a piece of property that has a lingering debt to it. And can we get some idea of where we're going with this property? Its vision, is Bethel going to step forward? Is anybody? Are we going to do something? I'm curious.
Commissioner, as you'll recall about, I'm not sure of the exact date, but we requested that the CRA board allocate this parcel basically to Frenchtown Development Partners, and that's a local group of people, including Reverend Holmes, I believe, and they've put together a development proposal. They're working on that. We gave them 6 months, I think, to come through with a proposal. Due to something beyond their control, they weren't able to bring the proposal to us at the time, so we gave them an extension. So basically, we are simply waiting for that. There is a deadline for when they need to come forward with the proposal. At that time, we'll bring that project to you and see what we have on the table. But no, this is actually in a fairly structured process of moving forward. Now, if that path does not pan out, then we would most likely, based on board direction, take it through the RFP process the same way we've done other projects.
Well, Ms. Chairman, I want to say that I'm not sure how big our trousers are, and we just may wear a little boy and little girl shoes. But if that project does not pan out, is it too much for us to act as a developer in the sense of what we've seen in Tampa when their CRA had the confidence and thought, energy within themselves to believe that they could facilitate a vision. And if the Bethel ideas don't materialize, I like to see us grow up and think ourselves big boys and girls, big enough to come up with a vision, not just RFP and wait for the next somebody from out of Indiana to come tell us what to do. I've lived in Tallahassee since Moses was a little boy. And Rec Turnquest is older than me, and he's been riding up and down the street. I just think that there is enough. It used to be a theater called the Leon, right in the next block. And there were enough things, a car wash, Preston Car Wash, Presto Car Wash, the Army, Navy store was that next block down. And Rec, you might remember some more things. I just don't think it's too large for this table to come up with our own ideas. I don't think it's beyond. And we have the past that gives us a template of possibilities there. And I won't be willing to support RFPing for somebody from New Jersey to come tell us what to do on a street that we have seen before live and blossom. And I think that it would give us probably the first time, an opportunity to practice as captains of industry to facilitate what we want and then to maybe bring in the other people. But I think that we should lead the vision. We should lead the vision if Bethel doesn't bring something that we can work with. So I'm just not wanting to give a great, beautiful block away, a huge block, commercial block, most important block, campus of a major university, historic. It got everything. And I don't want nobody else planning it if we won't do it ourselves.
Yes, ma'am.
Just wanted to reassure you, Commissioner, this particular CRA board has done an outstanding job in developing visions for new projects. For example, the Cascade project is based largely on a vision that this board created with the Central Street and the residential and the entertainment spaces. So I think we can accomplish what you're looking for.
Well, that's the precedent that we need to continue to follow, and we needn't fall out of line of what we've done there. And I want to pursue exactly what we've done. The Cascade was a turnaround. No one questions its contributions to the community, and we should use that as a confidence booster. If we've done it there on this side of the state's capital, we can damn sure do it on the other side of the state's capital.
Commissioner Lindley?
I was just going to say, last night I went to a really great county library lecture series on placemaking, and Sharice was there and talking about the Frenchtown area is one of the placemaking projects that we have underway. So I think there's a lot of energy and vitality going in that direction now. So I appreciate your comments, and I think it's definitely on everybody's radar. Thanks for being there last night, Sharice. That was a really great program. Appreciate it.
Any other comment? Motion on the floor is for staff recommendation made by Commissioner Lindley, seconded by Commissioner Miller. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye. Aye. The motion carries without objection. 6.01.
Thank you, Commissioners. So 6.01 has several components to it. One of them is to accept the staff update we're going to provide you on the Cascades project. Other is to authorize staff to seek us loans for up to 244 parking spaces, as you'll see in our agenda item, and to include the value of the hotel and the tax increment that will be returned to Cascades Park, or Cascades Joint Venture LLC. It's the new name for the North American Properties Southeast. It's now Cascades Joint Venture LLC. At the September 25th CRA board meeting, the CRA board authorized staff to move forward and to prepare development agreements with North American Properties. They covered four major components. They covered the demolition agreement, the development agreement, they covered the purchase of the commercial parking spaces, and the purchase of the amphitheater support space. Those agreements were executed earlier this month and are on their way to, well, they've already been approved by North American Properties, which is joint venture, CJV LLC. So as part of that, we just want to give you an update of what occurred in those documents, and also get your comments on some of the changes that occurred. So one of the things was in the densities. You know, as you recall in the agreement, we had a requirement in there that the CRA board had to approve any, or the CRA, excuse me, had to approve any densities that increased by 10% or more than 10%, excuse me. If you look on the table 1 in your agenda item, there were 3 areas where the increase was either more than 10% in a positive or negative fashion. So office space went from 30,385 square feet to 37,630 square feet. That was almost a 24% increase. Hotel units went from 123 units to 140 units. That was nearly a 14% increase. And in retail space square footage decreased from 26,150 square feet to 21,259 square feet. That was a decrease of just slightly less than 19%. And the other changes are listed in the agenda as well, but those are the only 3 that were 10%, that were more than 10%. As part of the agreement that we signed with the development agreement we signed with CJV LLC, we've recognized those changes, and those changes are now incorporated in the existing development agreement. As part of that, development agreement 2, there was an increase in the number of parking spaces. Originally, the parking spaces were 229 were envisioned for the site. As CJV further developed and further designed the property, they currently have an estimate of 244 parking spaces. It's not within the 10%, it's within the 10%, less than 10%, but it does increase the commitment of the CRA. You know, the parking spaces are about $28,384 per space is how we've priced them out. So this increase of 15 parking spaces would add about $425,760 to the cost of the parking garage if it stays at 244. That number could decrease a little bit. Sean can answer any questions you might have about the status of the overall development and where the garage may be, but we think that's probably a good number. Anticipate maybe it's a little bit less by the time it gets fully developed. So we're trying to we need to have your approval to increase, for staff to be able to move forward and change our loan amount from $6.5 million to up to 6.9, almost $7 million. And then the last item was when we brought when the action was brought to you to approve the agreement back at in November is one of our other updates. There was in there we had some documentation from North America, in September, some North America from the Downtown Redevelopment Commission had looked at it. And one of the recommendations that was included from the DRC, which was one of several recommendations we added in there, was that the value of the hotel would not be included in the tax increment that would be returned to the developer. We've simply further discussed this with the developer, and the reason they didn't include it at that time was because they were looking at not having a hotel developer identified yet. So they wanted to make sure they had a hotel developer identified and had a better handle on the hotel value. They're a little bit close along that way right now, so they want to clarify and that when the hotel is added, whether or not it's $18 million we project, or $15 million, or $25 million, whatever the value of the hotel, as determined by the Leon County property appraiser, when that is added to the overall development, that will be part of the tax increment that we returned to CJV. If you recall, in the agreement, they get 90% of the tax increment generated by the project. At the time we gave it to you, the project did not include the hotel. The project now includes the hotel, so it would be 90% of the total project value.
Anything else?
I think that covers them. That's
Commissioner Lindley.
First, I'd like to move options 1, 2, and 4, and just had a couple of comments and one request. I assumed that the hotel was in this all along, so I was sort of surprised to see it pop up as like, oh, and by the way, we were going to add a hotel, because to me that has always been a part of the project. So thanks for clarifying that. And then the other thing, we had a citizen who come up to speak about the trees, and I was just wondering if the developer would like to have a comment on that, on what's been going on. I do think we've had a whale of a lot of public comment and local meetings, all for over a year or more, that have been quite productive in terms of the civil rights recognition and the Art Deco building and so forth. But so if this area needs some explaining, I'd love to hear it.
Some explaining?
I'm trying to speak Southern. I've lived here 40 years.
Explain this to us.
All right, items 1, 2, and 4 has been moved by Commissioner Lindley. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Motion been seconded by Commissioner Richardson. Commissioner Pratt, you have the floor.
No, she asked for the developer to speak, if that's okay with the
Mr.
chairman.
Developer, please speak to us.
Some explaining to do. Good morning. For the record, my name is Sean McIntyre, Managing Partner for North American Properties for the state of Florida. First of all, thank you, Rick. I think that, as Commissioner Lindley said, the hotel was actually part of the original RFP. It had always been our intent to include it. There was a miscommunication between Rick and I when we established the value, but that has now been cleared up. On the parking spaces, we have preliminary designs. If the parking deck gets bigger, obviously it costs more, and on the same token, if it gets smaller, those two city floors of public parking, now that we've done our soils investigations, we'll be able to design the foundations and nail that down to the final number of parking spaces. So at the time, right now, there's 242, but that's why we always had the 10% sway on all the uses, and that 10% sway also would include the parking spaces, larger or smaller. As we go into this, this project is unprecedented in the city, and we've worked for 2 years now. This time last year, I stood at this dais explaining that the selection committee had selected us, and we've been to every CRA meeting since then. I love being here in a shirt and tie, but I'd rather be in jeans and a sweatshirt out of the site. So I think that this hopefully is the last time we're working through this. We met this morning with the Growth Management Department and went through the PUD process. We think that in meeting with city staff and the building officials and the planning department that we will be able to proceed and still be able to work towards groundbreaking later this summer, and also a grand opening date of the same date that we've always established in late 2020. The transparency of this project, even though the open to the public speaker was concerned about that maybe that had not been to public notice, I can say that it has been through a pretty arduous process of public hearings, public involvement, et cetera. There are competing priorities on this site. There's no doubt about that. There are trees on that site that have been there for a long time, but there are also, it's an urban setting surrounded by almost a 30-acre park. So we believe in following actually this board's lead lead when they put out the RFP for a dense, urban, multi-use, 18-hour community. That the plan we've set forth in these agreements that we've signed about a week and a half ago is the correct movement forward. We have done a market study. We've done extensive studies of the downtown residential capacity. The previous speaker was in error. The downtown 2 condominium high-rises are in the 80 percentile of vacancy, of actually occupancy. One of them is almost 92%. But that is a condominium that is sitting kind of in the middle on an island of the city, a residential island. We're not creating a residential island, we're creating a mixed-use community. There's been questions on whether the developer's taking the trees down and not paying into the tree fund. We're more than happy and willing to pay into every fund that's required. The agreement we have with this body, there were $7 million worth of public improvements. We're paying $5 million. This body's agreed to pay a little over $2 million. That could be offset by certain waivers, but it's not at my discretion. It's at the city's discretion. So we are more than willing and have always been to pay into every tree bank or whatever needs to be necessary after we take into consideration the 4 sides of each of 2 city blocks where street trees and other trees will be replaced. Granted, they won't be 60 inches wide, but if you drive down Gaines Street now, after 4 or 5 years of those trees being planted, you'll see that canopy is coming into effect. Irrigation, fertilization, and good maintenance does reestablish the street canopy system. So with that, I'll answer any more questions, but I believe that we are there. We're through the red zone, right about the goal line. Our company is ready to proceed with this vote today. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sean, I want to personally thank you for you and North American Properties for all that you've done for this community. Yours is a model for the kinds of partnerships that we would envision for this CRA, for this city, and for this county. You have attended every meeting. You have entered into negotiations with our staff and negotiated in good faith. And so we appreciate that. I think this project is going to be a game changer for downtown Tallahassee. There's no question about it. And you all have been an excellent partner, and we just look forward to working with you going forward on this project and hopefully others that you might want to enter into in the future. So thank you all.
Chairman.
Commissioner Proctor.
There's no doubt that I have loads of respect for the work that has been put into this project and have paid attention to the commitments that have been made. The request today that miscommunication requires our body to fork $400-some thousand, I'm not persuaded by. I don't think that our not supporting 14, 15 additional parking spaces that were not communicated and not calculated, and whether that was on our staff or whether it was on North American, but both of them sat in this room and allowed for our agreement to occur with both sides obviously dropping the ball. If we were to split this and our folk fall on one sword and they fell on the other sword, that would be more palatable to me. But to say that obviously that we're going to foot the whole miscalculation, miscommunication, suggests to me that my staff did more ball dropping responsible, and I didn't hear that articulated, and not hearing it, I don't find a compelling reason that we should roll up our sleeves and find a larger vein and pump more money into this project. I'm very comfortable with the amounts of money that we've put into this, and we've been fully told previously that this would suffice and be sufficient to realize the vision that was presented to us. And if this $400,000 at the game changer is going to stop the project because everything is taken care of, we're talking about the parking lot here, and I just believe that for another $500,000 for 14 parking spaces, we'd do better to give vouchers to let those 14 people park down the street, and that would probably serve out for about 10 years worth of parking. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I won't be supporting.
Roxanne?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. I did want to clarify that the number of parking spaces, if you'll recall from the September CRA board meeting, when we brought back the list of square footages and the number of parking spaces, we pointed out at that time that because the developer is very early in their design process, we're having to do all of this before they actually get their PUD approval. We pointed out at that time that the number of spaces, the square footage of the different uses would likely change, and that's why we had the 10% variable in there. We just wanted to be clear. We didn't want to tie them to something if they weren't actually through designing it. So we still have the 10% variable. It's not that a ball was dropped. It's that we're trying to work with them as they go through their design and analysis. I want to point out, they still are going through the PUD process. There may be further changes that would come out of that process. That's very normal. When a developer goes through a PUD process, that they come out with some changes. We're keeping that 10% variable in there. It's more refined now than the numbers were 3 or 4 months ago, but we're keeping the 10% variable in there, so if they do exceed it, just like today, they would come back and we would say, by the way, we're adding or subtracting this number of square footages. So it's just part of the way of moving this process forward.
What's the number of years that we're going to recoup the money that we're putting into this project anyway? What have we calculated as a forecast for what this will generate and what this project's going to do that we get our money back?
The project in general or the parking garage?
Both of them.
Okay, well, I do not have the numbers in the parking garage in front of me right now. We can get that information and get it back to you. But in general, the project, the way it was approved by the board, was that the value of the project, 90%, right now this property has a zero taxable value. So everything that comes from this is funds the CRA, neither the city or the county currently receive from ad valorem tax perspective.
Could you repeat that, Rick? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. So right now the property has no taxable value, zero taxable value. So any increase, any value this property brings to the site will result in additional tax increment for the city and the county. As the project was approval was that the 90% of the value generated by this project would be returned to the developer through the life of the CRA, downtown CRA, which will end in June of 2034. The other 10% will be retained by the CRA. After July 1st, 2034, the city and the county will enjoy the full taxable value from this property, which they right now receive nothing on.
Rick, make it plain. ROI, even with the 10% over time, how many years is it going to take us? When we recoup the ROI, our investment, by the time this CRA ends? I'm pretty sure we will, but have you calculated those numbers?
Well, because you're returning 90% of the project value to the developer, you're really going to have almost, you have like about an 8/10 of a percent ROI. It's when the project comes on it's when the CRA district ends and you guys collect, the city and the county respectively collect the taxable value. That's when you'll receive, at $150 million, you'll receive, a little over $2 million a year between the city and the county in additional taxable value.
So as I understand it, we'll recoup some of it during the lifespan of the CRA, but after the CRA is no longer, then we'll recoup 4, 5, 6 times and even more of what we invested here from
However
CRA.
long the development exists, you will receive that. And that's not just for this development. That obviously applies to the entire downtown district. When it settles, or the Frenchtown South Side, when it sunsets, all the value that's been added from things like the block and the deck and the Onyx and all these other projects will turn over to the city and the county respectively.
My question was very, very simple, and that is amortizing this particular investment. How long does it take for us to get the 6.5 million? Did I hear that? How much money we put? How much would it take to get the $7 million back?
I did also want to point out there are a couple of ways of calculating ROI, and one of the most important ways is not just looking at the property value, but looking at the number of jobs and the salaries and that type of revenue that's created. We have provided that.
I want to look at it from that, Roxanne. I get all that. That ain't my question. My question is simple. How long does it take to get $7 million back when these people start paying taxes on this piece of property? I don't want to hear all that other stuff.
Commissioners, let me go back to your original question. Right now, the property is making zero property
I
tax.
get that.
Commissioner, let me finish, please. What
Can
we are
y'all
saying
answer
is
the
from day
question?
one, you will have a return on investment that is positive to your cash balance that you have never received before. Without this development, there is no return on investment. But you're asking two things. One is regarding the parking. By year 7, this parking, according to our estimates, will be fully funded by the revenues that are generated by the people who park in that parking garage.
What that mean?
Year 7.
So year 7 years, the parking garage is
On the
paid.
parking, 7
Yeah,
years,
on the
we
parking.
recoup that.
Right.
That is correct.
What's the rest of it
For the tax increment,
for the $7 million or the 6.5?
that is what I just responded to.
So
By
it
year
would
7,
take
you will
7
have that
years.
fully funded by the folks who are parking in that parking garage.
All right, what about the building and all that stuff that we get taxing back from?
No, I think what Wayne is saying is by year 7, we would have recouped $7 million. Is that correct?
No, by year 7, the parking garage will be fully funded by the revenues that are generated by the folks who are parking in that parking garage.
Okay, Wayne, what Commissioner Proctor is asking for, and I don't think you guys have the answer to it,
We do
is
not.
we're investing $6.9 million. What year will we get back that $6.9 million? If staff doesn't know that, because, I mean, I get it, that the developer is taking 90% and we're taking 10%, then let's get that number and then email it out to us. I get what you're saying is we're not getting any taxes off of it now, period. But we are making an investment, okay? So the investment that we have, that we're making, will be recouped at some point.
That is correct.
Right. A portion of it, because if we're just getting 10% back, a portion of it will be recouped from now until 2034. But I do not believe that we'll recoup the full amount by 2034 based off the 90-10 split. So take that amount that we're getting from now to 2034, okay, and then add whatever else you got to add, and tell Commissioner Proctor how many years it will take for us to recoup that investment. We won't have the answer today. Let's get the answer to him as soon as possible. If we want to discuss it later, we can discuss it later.
This is something that ought to go on all of our projects, that we can say to our community that by the year 2047, we would have fully redeemed monies put out. None of us can take out a loan in 20 years, 30 years, however long it's supposed to amortize, but we don't hear those dates. We don't know that. They're asking for additional money. I don't even know when they're going to finish paying us back this. Now they're going to take a little longer to pay back an additional $500,000. I need to know how long are we tying money up?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Miller?
Thank you. You know, the question was, how long will it take us to get paid back? And given the fact that we're sitting here as representatives of the public, I wanted to point a couple things out. The school board isn't part of this. On day 1, year 1, they will be getting their entire full amount of property tax off this property. Secondarily, from the hotel, every room that's rented out, from day 1, will put money into the Tourist Development Council because of the tourist development tax. In addition to that, there's untold amounts of sales tax that's going to be collected from people who shop in the stores and do various other types of business on the property. So to look at this as through this very narrow window of what is going to go into the city's checkbook or the county's checkbook is only a small portion of the picture, because this is so much more than it is generating now. It's just mind-boggling. That's why they have an environment or an economic impact done. And I don't know if you all remember, but there was, and we have discussed the economic impact of this project, and all of those things are taken into account when that's done. So I think all those things are worth considering when we talk about how long will it take us to get paid back.
Commissioner Lindley?
And can I just make a comment to Commissioner Proctor? Leon County will get $8.6 million in additional property tax, not to mention what Commissioner Miller said, every year going forward, because now we have this property back on the tax rolls. It's been exempt for, I can't imagine how long.
Probably since the jail
there
was
were
built in the
public
30s
buildings.
because it was owned by the state
Right.
for so long.
So I agree. I mean, I think, I don't see even the relevance of exactly when the parking garage money will come back, because this is a massive, great investment for our community, as Commissioner Proctor outlined, for the schools who have not been here at all for a single discussion, but they will benefit, and the sales tax and the tourism and on and on. So,
And that's
I mean,
just amazing to me, you all, because,
well,
you know, for people who've
about
not rolled
this
their
for 10
sleeves up
years.
to be, that we're in the back seat waiting 12 years, we're going to take 10%. And as Commissioner Miller has pointed out, from day one, Lottie Dottie and everybody is going to get a full measure of benefit of this project. And I don't understand, you know, why we sitting in the back seat on the back of the pickup truck and can't get in until 2030 to get a larger share of money. I don't know who negotiated that. I mean, I could be, and that may be true. However, I believe that I understand that not just this property is off the roll. I know that 52% of our property in this community is off the roll. That's not a surprise to me. I'm simply asking, what is the finite date that we break even and we get our money back? And I mean, I didn't need all the other lessons.
So this is what we'll do. What we'll do is, staff, will you please email Commissioner Proctor with the answer to that question? I think the relevancy of what we're talking about here is the fact that we're taking a property that has no tax increment, and we have an investor that's willing to come to the table with our partnership and provide development that will give it a tax increment that is substantially more than what we could have ever imagined it would have been on that site. And it provides benefit not just for the CRA, but it provides benefit for Leon County, the City of Tallahassee, School Board, Tourist Development Tax, and any other tax entity in town. There's no doubt in my mind or anybody else's mind up here the kind of value that it's going to provide. Okay, so when you talk about return on investment, if you're talking about Leon County's portion itself, I would say that we get our return immediately upon this development being built. City of Tallahassee may have to wait a little longer. Okay, and then the jobs created as well. The CRA, our job here is to increase tax increment. Can somebody tell me a project that we've done that's increased the tax increment of a property more than this project has? To go from zero to tens of millions of dollars of tax increment. There's no other project that we've done to match what we've achieved here. And so, I mean, I get where he's coming from, but let's get the numbers in and let's move on with this vote, because I don't see the relevant. I see where he's coming from, but then again, this is a great project and it's provided everybody in here benefit. And I don't want it to be clouded by a number that really, when you look at the whole picture, is very small in the benefit that we're receiving.
I'd like to call the question.
Thank you. Motion on the floor made by Commissioner Lindley, seconded by Commissioner Richardson with staff recommendation. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Aye. Motion carries 5-1, or 5-2. I'm sorry, 4-2.
No, it's 5-1.
No,
Oh, who
4-2.
voted against it?
Item 7.
Who voted against it?
In opposition was Commissioner Proctor and Commissioner Maddox. 7.01.
Good morning, Commissioners. Item 7.01 is our fiscal year 2017 budget closeout. The budget closeout agenda item shows the fiscal year 2017 approved budget and compares it to the fiscal year 2017 actual budget by showing you the difference between the two budgets. As your agenda item indicates, for fiscal year 2017, the actual revenues received for both districts totaled over $7 million, which includes prior year funds, as well as the sale of the O'Connell land property and 715 Gain Street property. The actual operating expenses for both districts were approximately $641,000, not including the EMS refund to the county. The operating expenses were $151,000 less than projected in the adopted budget. The actual capital expenditures for fiscal year 2017 and allocations were over $2 million, including prior year master funds, which some of those prior year master funds were used to cover some of the fiscal 2017 capital expenses. The budget closeout numbers that you have in your agenda item on the spreadsheets that are attached have been reviewed and confirmed by our accounting services, and staff recommends the board accept the fiscal 2017 CRA budget closeout, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Commissioner Richardson.
Mr. Chairman, what has been the increase in personnel expenses over the past fiscal year?
During fiscal year 2017, the personnel operating expenses are approximately 16% of our TIF revenue, but from fiscal year, I believe fiscal years 16 to 17, that increase was, I want to say, Rick, 11% from fiscal year 16 to fiscal year 17.
Okay.
That's correct.
So it was not 66%.
Now, for the 66% that you're speaking of, that's from fiscal year 13 to fiscal year 17. So from fiscal year 13 to fiscal year 17, there was approximately 66% increase in our personnel expenses, and that was mainly due to us taking on a full-time executive director as well as taking on a full-time planner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make sure we corrected misinformation that was being reported to this community.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other comment?
Move approval.
Approval been moved by Commissioner Madden, second.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Miller. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. We're on now to public comment.
Thank you.
Any public comment?
We do have,
To say something.
Yes.
That's it.
You want to say something?
No, I'm sorry, I was coming to Sheila behind you. I think we have one.
we do have one speaker card on agenda item, Pamela Duff.
Oh.
If you would, please state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Pamela J. Duffick, 9320 Royal Troon, Tallahassee. I came to this meeting under the assumption that there would be discussion of the Tourist Development Council Arts and Culture Funding Plan. I didn't see it on the agenda, but having sat through the meeting, I see there was an item discussed on future meetings. That one meeting is February 1st. Is that an open meeting to the public, or is that closed to only the advisory council?
They're all open. Oh, advisory council, go ahead.
It's for the advisory council, but all of our meetings technically are open to the public.
And I didn't see where those meetings are announced. Perhaps I can get with you afterwards, Ms. Manning, and see where they are. I've looked at the CRA website and don't see those meetings announced.
Sure, absolutely.
And the workshops that will be open to the public will also be on that same page?
The workshops will be, yes, they are absolutely for the public, and they will be heavily advertised, so we'll make sure that everyone's aware of them.
All right. Thank you. I'll get with you afterwards on where on the website those will be announced. Sure. Thank you very much.
Discussion by commissioners on unagenda items.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I did talk to Wayne and staff prior to the meeting about this, but I wanted them to give us a public update on negotiations with the owner of the properties in the Southside Shopping Center and Town South.
It's perfect. Yes.
Sure. As you probably know, we have been talking through an intermediary with the owner of the shopping center property, Town South and Southside, which is on South Monroe, on both sides of South Monroe. We had been working previously with them and with city staff to do a redesign for the parking lot. We had reached a tentative agreement with the property owner regarding their share of the funding. Several things came up during that time, including possible acquisition of one of the properties that did cause a delay. However, since that time, we've completed the site plan, and it came in due to some issues on the site at a higher amount than we had anticipated. I think that might have caused a little bit of sticker shock with the property owner. We are still in communication with that individual. There are also some other redevelopment issues going on in the area with FAMU, which may actually require a relook at the site. What we're looking at now is the Piggly Wiggly side of the road, if you will. We do intend to keep those negotiations going until something is accomplished on that site. I think we all agree that it needs to be redeveloped. So there are a lot of different options we can look at, and in light of changes in the area, we're going to have to kind of update our plan.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Richardson?
Thank you. You know, and I guess the point that I'm making here is that there, you know, those are, South Adams and South Monroe are two of our major north-south thoroughfares. They handle thousands of cars per day, and yet they pass right by both of those shopping centers to whatever destination they're headed to. And I'm just interested in those being destination points where some of that traffic, rather than just passing those shopping centers, will make a left turn or make a right turn, and where they will be able to patronize those businesses. And right now, that's just not happening. So, you know, my thinking is if we have to make a little more of an investment, let's consider that. We've certainly made I almost said huger, larger investments than that. But speaking of recouping our dollars from the investment, I would have to imagine that the increase in the property value from those improvements would cause us to recoup those tax dollars in a fairly short period of time.
Commissioner Proctor, before I recognize you, I had Commissioner Max and Q speak as well. Have we ever had I think we did have an agenda item about this. Did we have an agenda? We did? And we just gave staff the ability to negotiate with the property owner. And before anything will be approved, it will come back to us, correct?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Okay. I'm kind of with Commissioner Richardson in that, you know, as these projects come up, or as these improvements or plans come up, even if the property owner objects to or thinks too much on the sticker price, I kind of want to see what it looks like. I mean, I hadn't seen anything in a while. Like, what do the plans look like? What are you guys talking about? That kind of thing. Because I think Commissioner Richardson has a point that people will ride right past that shopping center to go to McDonald's or to go to any other place in South City and never think twice about driving through unless they're driving through to try to get to Adams from Monroe or Monroe to Adams. So, yeah, I would kind of like to see what you guys got going. Okay. Even if it's in the status report, you know, I just want to see what the plans look like.
They actually have drawings we can show you.
Yeah, that would make me happy. Commissioner Proctor and Commissioner Maddox.
Two things, Mr. Chairman. Interest in South City CRA and where we, with the status report of creating a CRA for South City. Have we made any progress in that regard?
Yes, Commissioner, we have. Actually, we've completed the analysis of the 3 different areas that were identified by this board for possible inclusion into the CRA. That's a CRA expansion. We do need to have some other things, for example, discussions with the county on how that district may or may not be structured, whether there'll be members of it, downtown. We need to get through all of that, and then we will be back in March with a formal request for determination of expansion or not. We also took the request to our Frenchtown Southside Citizens Advisory Committee, and they did a great job looking at it. They gave us some very clear recommendations on what they'd like to see happen in that area, and you'll have that before you in March.
Good. Secondly, bond community, do we have a focal point for bond and a big vision, a picture for bond community, and how are we facilitating that? What are the groups that are aligning, and how are we moving forward?
We've been working with the bond neighborhood group and also with at least 2 separate small development groups. Mr. Turnquist is one of them, talking to them about what their plans are for that area. We also are working with Cynthia Barber's folks in Neighborhood Affairs, and they're doing a great job bringing everybody together to talk about that area and also about the larger South Side issues. So what we'd like to do is, when everything's in line and we're supporting Mrs. Barber's efforts to do I'm sorry, I'm at a loss for words today, but her efforts to bring down the crime and basically clean up that area, which we are proceeding with right now, then we'd like to work with these individual groups on what their plans are for redeveloping some of those parcels. So yes, we're actually proceeding stepwise. It's being coordinated with the city and with planning.
Would an ask of May or June be too soon, too early for us to hear about some of the consolidated ideas which might be trending?
Actually, no. We might be able to bring back something in March, but definitely by May, we should easily be able to come back with a report.
Say May. We'll kick it out to May.
Yeah, and because we're all working together on it, we should be able to come back with a report anytime.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Maddox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As to the South Adams, South Monroe Shopping Center, I have a bit of a philosophical difference. The CRA is designed, as you've heard me say ad nauseum, so I won't make you hear it too many more times, to change areas that cannot redevelop on their own through using public infrastructure. In this particular case, we do not have a willing partner from all indications of the folks that own the shopping center, and the CRA has attempted to throw money at them over and over again, and they simply don't want it or don't indicate that they want it in any way. I would rather us, number one, provide infrastructure dollars in that corridor that would change all the development in that area. Number two, these property owners are not in any way cash-strapped or impoverished at all, so they have the ability to put capital into their own project should they wish to do so. Number three, if we are going to get outside the window of infrastructure and do more intensive redevelopment in individual projects, I would sure rather do it with folks that are willing to do it with us. So maybe if we did it on the properties all around that, it would lead to development pressure for them to do their own if they didn't want assistance from CRA. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, sir.
So when you talk about the corridors,
Commissioner Miller.
talking about expanding it, you know, some years ago we had a proposal at MPO to expand it.
The floor is yours.
The meeting within the meeting.
I wanted to bring up something we've talked about before, and we haven't ever made any real decision about it, but we've talked about doing, or looking into at least, the possibility of residential facade grants, where we give people some modicum of assistance in trying to bring up their own properties. So I don't know what the temperament of the board is regarding that, and if there is an interest, if we could possibly have some feedback from staff.
We have actually been talking about that at the staff level. There are a lot of issues that are related to residential grants, right? But one of the best ideas that's come along is actually a coordinated effort so that you're taking this on a block type level rather than individual houses, a house here, a house over there, that you're working with the neighborhoods in a coordinated way, and you identify specific improvements that need to be made, whether it's landscaping or demolition or cleaning of a lot, painting a house, something like that. And those discussions are going on at a staff level. I think it's going to take us a bit to come up with a real program that we think can work, but that is being discussed.
I appreciate that, Ms. Chairman. When Brenda Tanner led the department here at the city, Brenda would lead tremendous efforts for cleanup Saturday, cleanup day, and she was just a real taskmaster general. I would have an interest in the CRA if it's a part of our purpose to remove blight. If we would focus on some cleanup days and make some investment in a hands-on effort or springtime cleaning or whatever it is, but I would love to see us put several $1,000s to do a big cleanup day, a spring cleanup, and our trucks pick up debris and this and that, and have a barbecue at 1 o'clock and feed people for participating in the effort, neighborhood associations and blah, blah, blah. I don't know if that's within our purview, but it addresses blight and cleaning up and all the stuff that we say. So it's sort of a, what's that word, develops collegiality. The notion, I think, someone said the word crime, and bringing the sense of partnership and neighbors being shoulder to shoulder to express care, and a little 2-3 hour muscle, and then come together and drink some lemonade. I think that's it helps engender community spirit and pride. Is that a doable? Is that a doable? Is that within the scope and the statutory authority that we have?
I'd have to check, but actually the city does that type of thing already, and they do it very well. They have they're able to bring out a lot more people, and we participate in those. As far as the CRA doing it by ourselves, I would need to look at a statute. I don't know that that's been done, but we do participate in the city cleanups.
Can I make a comment on point? Yeah, I think it would be helpful, given Commissioner Proctor's question, that we have Ms. Barber come in and tell the CRA board exactly what and how those are handled and what kind of partnership we could, because believe me, it would be wonderful to have more, as you said, shoulder to shoulder in these efforts. So if you could have her come and give us a briefing on exactly what the city's program is, how often they go out, what the intent is, and so on.
We'd be happy to. That's one of the really cool things that's happening is the city is really bringing the departments together and coordinating all of this work that's being done. And the lead department is some of Mrs. Barber's folks, so we were planning on doing that.
Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Capital Area Neighborhood Network, or CAN, under the leadership of Christique Henry, has also been very active in identifying Southside neighborhoods and scheduling those neighborhood cleanups in partnership with the city. So yeah, lots of that is happening, and it is a partnership between the neighborhoods and the city of Tallahassee.
Yeah, thank you for the information. Any other thing from commissioners?
Move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. We are adjourned. Yeah. Yes, sir.